You are tuned in to another edition of Americana Music Profiles, brought to you by Americana Rhythm Music Magazine and AmericanaMusicMagazine.com. I'm your host, Greg Tutwiler. Let's jump right in to the next exciting interview. It was a performance by Sam Bush at a Newgrass Revival concert when Scott Slay was just 6 years old that keyed his interest in bluegrass music. His dad bought him a mandolin for Christmas, and the rest is history. We'll talk to Scott about that journey in this edition of Americana Music Profiles. Hi, Scott. Welcome to the podcast this afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So we are talking to you in Colorado. Is that correct?
That's it. I'm over here in Denver, Colorado right now.
Okay. And you mentioned to me a few moments ago that when we get off the phone, you're heading back into teaching. Is that a school job, or what do you do?
Yeah, I'll be going back and teaching ukulele to about a class of 25 third graders.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that a special event for today or a normal gig for you?
That's a day gig for me. At least kind of in the fall and all the way through the spring.
Yeah.
And actually, this is the last week of school. So.
Oh, good. Okay. So that I guess that means festival touring season is just about ready to kick in, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. So give me a little bit of background about yourself and your music. What got you interested in bluegrass?
My dad was a band, well, he still is, but a banjo player and kind of like a bluegrass rhythm guitar player. And when I was 6 years old, he took me to a little tiny bluegrass festival at the Big Lagoon State Park, which is near Pensacola, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And the headliner was Newgrass Revival.
Yeah.
And my dad says that after the show, I looked up at him and said, I want a little guitar. Because, of course, Sam Bush was over there headbanging, with
right,
curly hair and all that. And,
yeah.
And that Christmas, I got a mandolin. My dad started showing me a couple chords and things. And by the time I was 8 years old, he put me in his band, basically just kind of chopping, full bluegrass band. And I did that for a little while and eventually started learning, fiddle tunes and whatnot, and became like an actual member of his band, Highway 99, and we did small festivals touring on the southeast coast.
Yeah. That's cool. I think I read where you actually started your own band at around like the age 16. Is that right?
Yeah. So when I was 16, I actually was kind of a couple of things. I had some friends that wanted to play in a rock band, but they didn't play any instruments. And their parents were ready to, buy whatever and whatnot. And, I was the only musician in the friend group. And
right.
So they convinced their parents to buy drum sets and electric guitars and electric basses and sound system and all this and whatnot. And just, with the knowing that I was going to have to learn all those things and teach them. And so that's what we did. We did it was like 90s rock, a little bit of metal stuff, but Weezer and that kind of thing. But then at the same time, a friend of mine, Fred Donovan, had just left a band called the Dog River Boys in Mobile, Alabama, and he had moved to South Florida, and they were looking for a new guitar player, so I took that spot. And it was a bluegrass band.
Uh-huh.
And my dad also joined the band playing dobro, and I did that all the way through college.
Wow, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. And at what point did you become interested in songwriting? When did that become a part of this for you?
Well, my mother was an English teacher, so she, growing up, there was always for fun, like in the summertime and whatnot, we're writing little short stories and poems and whatnot. And my dad was a musician, so I was always around music. And
yeah.
When I was 16 and I joined the band, Dog River Boys, I asked the band leader, Phil Proctor, where did the name come from? And he said that there is a they used to practice, like before I joined the band, they either had to, everyone lived in Mobile and had to drive over a bridge that went over Dog River to get to Hurley, Mississippi, where the banjo player lived, Johnny Holston, or vice versa. So they were always going across Dog River, and they just kind of decided to name their band that. And I said, that's a great story, but do you mind if I write a song called Dog River? And he said, sure. And so I just started doing some research, online and just looking up different things about the geographical area and whatnot, and I wrote a fictional song called Dog River, and I actually recorded that song on an album called The Rail that I just released with Bonfire Records. So that was my first songwriting experience, and I really chose to write the song because I felt like the band I was in needed a better story than just crossing a river. That's why we're named that.
And how old were you when you did that?
I was 16 when I did that. Yeah.
So, how does a 16-year-old figure out the process of research and getting phrasing together? I mean, is that all coming from mom and being an English teacher? Where does that? Because that doesn't sound like something a typical 16-year-old is gonna be able to. It sounds a little more intellectual than that for most 16-year-olds.
Well, I feel like a lot of it, would be like personal life experiences, like even like personal, like educational experiences, like writing poems with my mother in the summers. And then also, being around bluegrass musicians and playing bluegrass songs that have, very common chord progressions, sometimes even similar, like lyric material from age 8, 8 years of that basically. And I just I just felt like, hey, I really dig what Blue Highway is doing. I really dig what Lonesome River Band is doing. I still do, but this is what I was thinking back then. And I just decided that I wanted to write this song, but I didn't really know much about Dog River other than there was a bridge that crossed Dog River to get to Mississippi, or the other way to get to Mobile, Alabama. And so I felt like just from writing essays and whatnot in school, you always have to have some kind of source, whether it's your personal experience or it's something make believe, or there needs to be something that gives it some substance.
Sure. And
I looked up, there was like I forgot, there was like a newspaper article about a tire swing that was found, like just like really super old tire swing, just kind of in the woods near that area, and no one knew, like, who put it there or whatnot. And I was just looking at that, and they were talking about some other things that were in the area, and I just sort of started thinking, what could be a fictional idea for how this came about, since no one knows who put this tire swing here. And I thought, most of the time that's something that kids like to do in the summer. I'm sure there was an adult involved putting it up, but that's actually one of the lyrics in Dog River. It says, we're going to explore. Then we'll explore. There's a tire swing in the breeze. And from doing some, poem writing with my mother, she always talked about, trying to paint a picture with words.
Yeah.
So that I was trying to paint this whole description of probably like elementary age boy and girl who are just kind of doing this their own like make believe world every summer when they're not in school, and they're fishing and they're playing house, and they're skipping rocks across the stream, and they're finding tire swings in the middle of the woods, and staking that's theirs, and that's kind of, I guess, what drove it all. And then having all the experience playing lots of different songs and singing different melodies and playing different chord progressions and whatnot, it just sort of led me to write my own chord progression to fit that.
Huh, that's cool. Will you get to do a video for that? Is that an possibility?
I'm sure we'll get there. I did one for Truth Came Out, which is a song I co-wrote with my wife Brittany, And then I also recorded that one with Sierra Hull singing, playing mandolin, and some of my heroes on there. Sammy Schuler's playing banjo, and Mark Schatz playing bass. Jim Van Cleve. These are all like, heroes of mine. But there's a video out there of that one. In the process of putting together some ideas to do a video for the title track, The Rail. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure something will come along down the road for Dog River. Something will.
Now, you mentioned several of the folks that are involved with this CD, and there's quite a few of the great bluegrassers of today in that list. How did you find yourself in positions to work with those guys? Have you toured with them? How did those relationships come about for you?
Everything just seemed like it was almost like a stepping stone or a link to the next thing. It all started with a really high-paying wedding gig in Virginia that I ended up playing, having Sammy Schuler play banjo and Telecaster on, and then that led to a formation of an Americana band I was in called the Virginia Sky. Played at IBMA. I think it was like 2015. I can't remember, something like that. So that was that, and we recorded an album and ended up, through the connection of Sammy, getting Sierra to make an appearance on there. We had Randy Kouris on there, and some other folks too. And then, when I decided I wanted to do a solo project, I reached out to Sam again. I'd been playing with Sam off and on. Also been playing some with Mike Mumford, because I was living in Washington, D.C., and kind of close to there, north of Baltimore. I was also playing with Mark Schatz. He actually lives in D.C., so I was doing a lot of local stuff. When they're on the road traveling on the weekends, I'd be playing with someone else. But then, when those things pop up on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday radar, we were doing some trio stuff around town. And so I started off recording the project with Mark Schatz and Sammy Schuler, and we basically recorded just about every banjo, rhythm guitar, bass, and lead vocal track with those two guys, and then did one of them with Mike Mumford on banjo instead. And I met a lot of these folks over the years, and I just started reaching out to certain people that I really felt like had the sound that I could hear in my head on these songs, on specific songs, and one thing led to another. I ended up having Josh Schilling sing on just about everything, and then that led to some other Mountain Heart folks like Aaron Ramsey and Jim Van Cleve, and just one connection leads to another. So
the album that we've kind of alluded to here a few times is just out. Is that right, or on the way out?
It actually came out officially. I believe it was March 7th.
Okay.
It came out. I know that Bonfire's getting ready to push the single The Rail on radio here in the next couple of weeks.
And that's the title of the album as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's also the first track. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you get a chance to take this out and tour with it, will the band have the same name, or do you have a band name, and where will these guys? Will you be able to use some of the same guys playing out?
Right. Yeah. So I've had different lineups ever since Pensacola, Florida, when I lived there about 8 years ago, called Scott Slay and the Rail, and most of the time it's a lot of the same material, but different. Sometimes it's different musicians playing it, depending on the location. I have a band that I play with on a regular basis here in Colorado and on the West Coast. Everybody is kind of based in Denver. I'm the oldest person in the band. They're all young folks. And we actually just headlined a festival over in San Bernardino, California, at the Calico Ghost Town. Had the pleasure of playing that festival with some great bands. We got to catch a set by New Blue and also one of my favorite bands, Special Consensus. So, when I'm playing out in this area, it'll probably be those folks. Sometimes